Hello and welcome to the session on Anaximander. Anaximander 610 to 546 BC was a pre-Socratic Greek philosopher who lived in Miletus, a city of Ionia, in modern-day Turkey. He belonged to the Milesian school and learned the teachings of his master Thales. He succeeded Thales and became the second master of that school, where he counted Anaximander and arguably Pythagoras amongst his pupils. Little of his life and work is known today. He is the first philosopher known to have written down his studies, although only one fragment of his work remains. Fragmentary testimonies found in documents after his death provide a portrait of the man. He was an early proponent of science and tried to observe and explain different aspects of the universe, with a particular interest in its origins, claiming that nature is ruled by laws just like human societies, and anything that disturbs the balance of the nature does not last long. Like many thinkers of his time, Anaximander's contribution to philosophy relate to many disciplines. In astronomy, he tried to describe the mechanics of celestial bodies in relation to the earth. In physics, his postulation that the indefinite or apparent was the source of all things led Greek philosophy to a new level of conceptual abstraction. His knowledge of geometry allowed him to introduce the no man in grace. He created a map of the world that contributed greatly to the advancement of geography. He was also involved in politics of Miletus and was sent as a leader to one of its colonies. Anaximander claimed that an indefinite, apparent principle that gives rise to all natural phenomena. Carl Sagan claims that he conducted the earliest recorded scientific experiment. Anaximander, son of Praxeades, was born in 610 BC. Establishing a timeline of his work is now impossible since no documents provide chronological references. Themistius, a 4th century Byzantine rhetorician, mentioned that he was the first of the non-Greeks to publish a written document on nature. Therefore, his text would be amongst the earliest written in prose, at least in the Western world. By the time of Plato, his philosophy was almost forgotten, and Aristotle, his successor, Theocritus, and a few doxographers provide us with the little information that remains. However, we know from Aristotle that Thales, also from Miletus, precedes Anaximander. It is debatable whether Thales actually was the teacher of Anaximander, but there is no doubt that the Anaximander was influenced by Thales' theory that everything is derived from water. One thing that is not debatable is that even the ancient Greeks considered Anaximander to be from the Monist school, which began in the Miletus with Thales, followed by Anaximander and finished with Anaximenes. 3rd century Roman rhetorician Allian depicts him as a leader of the Milesian colony to Apollonia on the Black Sea coast, and hence some have inferred that he was a prominent citizen. Indeed, various history explains that philosophers sometimes also dealt with political matters. It is very likely that leaders of Miletus sent him there as a legislator or to create a constitution or simply to maintain the colony's allegiance. Theories of Anaximander. Anaximander's theories were influenced by the Greek mythical tradition and by some ideas of Thales, the father of philosophy, as well as by observation made by older civilization in the East. All these were elaborated rationally. In his desire to find some universal principle, he assumed, like traditional religion, the existence of a cosmic order. And in elaborating his ideas on this, he used the old mythical language which ascribed divine control to various spheres of reality. This was a common practice for the Greek philosophers in a society which saw gods everywhere. Therefore, they could fit their ideas into a tolerably elastic system. Some scholars saw a gap between the existing mythical and the new rational way of thought, which is the main characteristics of the archaic period, 8th to 6th century BC, in the Greek city-states. Because of this, they did not hesitate to speak for a Greek miracle. But if we follow carefully the course of Anaximander's ideas, we will notice that there was not such an abrupt break as initially appears. The basic elements of nature, water, air, fire, earth, which the first Greek philosophers believed that constituted the universe, represent in fact the primordial forces of previous thought. Their collision produced what the mythical tradition had called cosmic harmony. In the old cosmogonies, Zeus establishes his order in the world by destroying the powers which were threatening this harmony. Anaximander claimed that the cosmic order is not monarchic but geometric, and this causes the equilibrium of the earth, which is lying in the center of the universe. Anaximander claimed that the cosmic order is not monarchic but geometric, and this causes the equilibrium of the earth, which is lying in the center of the universe. This is the projection on nature of a new political order and a new space organized around a center, which is the static point of the system in the society as in nature. In this space, there is isonomy, equal rights, and all the forces are symmetrical and transferable. The decisions are now taken by the assembly of demos in the agora, which is lying in the middle of the city. The same rational way of thought led him to introduce the abstract apparent, indefinite, infinite, boundless, unlimited as an origin of the universe, a concept that is probably influenced by the original chaos, gaping void, abyss, formless state of the mythical Greek cosmology from which everything else appeared. It also takes notice of the mutual changes between the four elements. Origin then must be something else unlimited in its sources that could create without experiencing decay, so that genesis would never stop. The concept of apparent. The bishop Hippolytus of Rome and later 6th century Byzantine philosopher Simplicius of Cilicia attribute to Anaximander the earliest use of the word apparent, infinite or limitless, to designate the original principle. He was the first philosopher to employ in a philosophical context the term arche, which until then had meant beginning or origin. For him, it became no longer a mere point in time, but a source that could perpetually give birth to whatever will be. The indefiniteness is spatial in early usages, as in Homer and as in Xenophon, who said that the earth went down indefinitely, that is, beyond the imagination or concept of man. Aristotle writes that the pre-Socratics were searching for the element that constitutes all things, while each pre-Socratic philosopher gave a different answer as to the identity of this element, water for Thales and air for Anaximander. Anaximander understood the beginning or the first principle to be an endless, unlimited primordial mass, apparent, subject to neither old age nor decay, that perpetually yielded fresh materials from which everything we perceive is derived. He proposed the theory of the apparent in direct response to the earlier theory of his teacher, Thales, who had claimed that the primary substance was water. The notion of temporal infinity was familiar to Greek mind from remote antiquity in the religious concept of immortality, and Anaximander's description was in terms appropriate to this conception. This arche is called eternal and ageless. For Anaximander, the principle of things, the constituent of all substances, is nothing determined and not an element such as water in Thales' view. Neither is it something halfway between air and water or between air and fire, thicker than air and fire or more subtle than water and earth. Anaximander argues that water cannot embrace all of the opposites found in nature. For example, water can only be wet, never dry, and therefore cannot be the one primary substance, nor could any of other candidates. He postulated the apparent as a substance that, although not directly perceptible to us, could explain the opposites he saw around him. Anaximander explains how the four elements of the ancient physics, air, earth, water and fire, are formed, and how earth and terrestrial beings are formed through their interactions. Unlike other pre-Socratics, he never defines this principle precisely, and it has generally been understood as a sort of primal chaos. According to him, the universe originates in the separation of opposites in the primordial matter. It embraces the opposites of hot and cold, wet and dry, and directs the movement of things. An entire host of shapes and differences then grow that are found in all the worlds, for he believed there were many. Anaximander maintains that all dying things are returning to the element from which they came, apparent. The one surviving fragment of Anaximander's writings deals with this matter. He describes the balanced and mutual changes of the elements. Simplicius mentions that Anaximander said all these in poetic terms, meaning that he uses the old mythical language. The goddess Justice keeps the cosmic order. This concept of returning to the element of origin was often revisited afterwards, notably by Aristotle. Friedrich Nietzsche, in his philosophy in the tragic age of the Greeks, stated that Anaximander viewed all coming to be as though it were an illegitimate emancipation from eternal being, a wrong for which destruction is the only penance. Physicist Max Born, in commenting upon Werner Heisenberg's arriving at the idea that the elementary particles of quantum mechanics are to be seen as different manifestations, different quantum states of one and the same primordial substances, proposed that this primordial substance be called apparent. Cosmology. Anaximander's bold use of non-mythological explanatory hypothesis considerably distinguishes him from previous cosmology writers such as Hesiod. It confirms that pre-Socratic philosophers were making an early effort to demythify physical processes. His major contribution to history was writing the oldest prose document about the universe and the origins of life. For this, he is often called the father of cosmology and founder of astronomy. However, Pseudo-Plutarch states that he still viewed celestial bodies as deities. Anaximander was the first to conceive a mechanical model of the world. In his model, the earth floats very still in the center of the infinite, not supported by anything. It remains in the same place because of its indifference, a point of view that Aristotle considered ingenious but false on the heavens. It is the curious shape is that of a cylinder with a height 1/3 of its diameter. The flat top forms the inhabited world, which is surrounded by a circular oceanic mass. Anaximander's realization that the earth floats free without falling and does not need to be resting on something has been indicated by many as the first cosmological revolution and the starting point of scientific thinking. Karl Popper calls this idea one of the boldest, most revolutionary and most portentous ideas in the whole history of human thinking. Such a model allowed the concept that celestial bodies could pass under the earth, opening the way to Greek astronomy. At the origin, after the separation of hot and cold, a ball of flame appeared that surrounded earth like a bark on a tree. This ball broke apart to form the rest of the universe. It resembled a system of hollow concentric wheels filled with fire, with the rims pierced by holes like those of a flute. Consequently, the sun was the fire that one could see through a hole the same size as the earth on the farthest wheel, and an eclipse corresponded with the occultation of that hole. The diameter of the solar wheel was 27 times that of the earth, and the lunar wheel, whose fire was less intense, 18 times. Its hole could change shape, thus explaining lunar phases. The stars and the planets located closer followed the same model. Anaximander was the first astronomer to consider sun as a huge mass and consequently to realize how far from earth it might be, and the first to present a system where the celestial bodies turned at different distances. Furthermore, according to Diogenes Laertius, he built a celestial sphere. This invention undoubtedly made him to the first to realize obliquity of the zodiac, as the Roman philosopher Pliny the Elder reports in Natural History. It is a little early to use the term ecliptic, but his knowledge and work on astronomy confirmed that he must have observed the inclination of the celestial sphere in relation to the plane of the earth to explain the seasons. The doxographer and the theologian Aetius attributes to Pythagoras the exact measurement of the obliquity, multiple worlds. According to Simplicius, Anaximander already speculated on the plurality of worlds, similar to atomist Leucippus and Democritus, and later philosopher Epicurus. These thinkers supposed that worlds appeared and disappeared for a while, and that some were born when others perished. They claimed that this movement was eternal, for without movement there can be no generation, no destruction. In addition to Simplicius, Hippolytus reports Anaximander's claim that from the infinite comes the principle of being, which themselves come from the heaven and worlds. Cicero writes that he attributes different gods to countless worlds. This theory places Anaximander close to the atomists and the Epicureans, who more than a century later also claimed that an infinity of worlds appeared and disappeared in the timeline of the Greek history of thought. And the thinkers were like Plato, Aristotle, Anaxagoras and Archelaus conceptualized a single world, while others like Anaximenes, Heraclitus, Empedocles and Dionysius speculated on the existence of a series of worlds, continuous or non-continuous. Meteorological phenomena. Anaximander attributed some phenomena such as thunder and lightning to the intervention of elements rather than to divine causes. In his system, thunder results from the shock of clouds hitting each other. The loudness of the sound is proportionate with that of the shock. Thunder without lightning is the result of the wind being too weak to emit any flame, but strong enough to produce a sound. A flash of lightning without thunder is a jolt of the air that disperses and folds, allowing a less active fire to break free. Thunderbolts are the result of a thicker and a more violent air flow. He saw the sea as a remnant of mass humidity that once surrounded earth. A part of that mass evaporated under the sun's action, thus causing the winds and even the rotation of the celestial bodies, which he believed were attracted to places where water is more abundant. He explained rain as a product of the humidity pumped up from the earth by the sun. For him, the earth was slowly drying up and water only remained in the deepest regions, which someday would go dry as well. Democritus also shared this opinion. Other accomplishments. Origin of humankind. Anaximander speculated about the beginners and origin of animal life. Taking into account the existence of fossils, he claimed that animals sprang out of the sea long ago. The first animals were born trapped in a spiny bark, but as they got older, the bark would dry up and break. As the early humidity evaporated, dry land emerged, and in time, humankind had to adapt. Anaximander considered that from warmed up water and earth emerged either fish or entirely fish-like animals. Inside these animals, men took form and embryos were held prisoners until puberty. Only then, after these animals burst open, could man and woman come out, now able to feed themselves. Anaximander put forward the idea that humans had to spend part of this transition inside the mouth of big fish to protect themselves from the earth's climate until they could come out in open air and lose their scales. He thought that considering humans' extended infancy, we could not have survived in the primeval world in the same manner we do presently. Cartography. According to geographer Eratosthenes, Anaximander was the first to publish a map of the world. The map probably inspired the Greek historian Hecatosser of Miletus to draw a more accurate version. Both are the first geographers after Homer. Maps were produced in ancient times, also notably in Egypt, Lydia, in Middle East and Babylon. Only some small examples survived until today. The unique example of the world map comes from late 9th century BC. These maps indicated directions, roads, towns, borders and geological features. Anaximander's innovation was to represent the entire inhabited land known to the ancient Greeks. Anaximander most likely drew this map for three reasons. First, it could be used to improve navigation and trade between Miletus colonies and other colonies around the Mediterranean Sea and Black Sea. Second, Thales would probably have found it easier to convince the Ionian city-states to join in a federation in order to push the Median threat away if he possessed such a tool. Finally, the philosophical idea of a global representation of the world simply for the sake of knowledge was reason enough to design one. Gnomon. Anaximander explained some basic notions of geometry. It also mentions his interest in the measurement of time and associates him with introduction in Greece of the gnomon. In Lacedaemon, he participated in the construction or at least in the adjustment of sundials to indicate solstices and equinoxes. Indeed, a gnomon required adjustment from a place to another because of difference in latitude. In his time, the gnomon was simply a vertical pillar or a rod mounted on a horizontal plane. The position of its shadow on the plane indicated the time of day. As it moves through its apparent course, the sun draws a curve with the tip of its projected shadow, which is shortest at noon when pointing due to south. The variation in the tip's position at noon indicates the solar time and the seasons. The shadow is longest on the winter solstice and shortest on the summer solstice. However, the invention of the gnomon itself cannot be attributed to Anaximander because its use as well as the division of days into 12 parts came from the Babylonians. Let us summarize what we have discussed so far. Anaximander's theories are assertion of the necessity of an appropriate balance between earth, fire and water, all of which may be independently seeking to aggrandize their proportion relative to the others. Anaximander seems to express his belief that a natural order ensures balance between these elements, that where there was fire, ashes, earth now exist. Anaximander was a pessimist who asserted that the primal being of the world was a state of indefiniteness. In accordance with this, anything definite has to eventually pass back into indefiniteness. Anaximander was a material monist, but a physics he posits is much more conceptually sophisticated than that of Thales. The evidence we have for him provides a slightly more thorough picture of his thought. Among the many impressive bits and pieces, we can find the first use of the famous principle of sufficient reason and what appears to be the first statement of evolutionary theory. Now, you can try to answer the questions given here. What are the views of Anaximander on the origin of the universe? What are the speculations of Anaximander about the beginning and origin of animal life? What are the contributions of Anaximander to ancient Greek philosophy? Explain the contributions of Anaximander towards cartography. What is gnomon? How it works? Hope that you may go through these reference books for further understanding. The Greek Experience, written by C.M. Baura in 1957, published by World Publishing Company, New York. The Pre-Socratic Philosophers, written by G.S. Kirk in 2003, published by Cambridge University Press. The First Scientist, Anaximander and His Legacy, written by C. Rovelli in 2011, published by Westholme Yardley. Explaining the Cosmos, the Ionian Tradition of Scientific Philosophy, written by D. W. Graham in 2006, published by Princeton University Press. Conjectures and Refutation, The Growth of Scientific Knowledge, written by K. Popper in 1998, published by Routledge. Thank you for watching this program. We can meet again with another topic. Till then, take care.